This lesson will focus on using the multiplication property of equality to solve linear equations. So in this section, we're going to talk about using the multiplication property, and then simplifying equations, and then using the multiplication property of equality. So let's talk about, first off, what is the multiplication property of equality? Just like we talked about in section 2.1, where the addition property allowed us to add or subtract the same number from both sides of an equation, the multiplication property says that if we have two equations, or two sides equal to each other, two expressions equal, we can multiply each side of the equation by some number, which is not 0, and get an equivalent equation. The other property that's kind of related to this says that if we start with two expressions that are equal, we can divide both of those expressions by the same non-zero number and get an equivalent equation. So the multiplication property of equality says that you may multiply or divide both sides of an equation multiply or divide both sides of an equation by the same non-zero number to produce an equivalent equation. Okay? And remember, our whole goal for doing that is we're trying to come down to finally performing some steps to an equation to come with a variable equal to a number. So we may have to multiply or divide something on each side so that we can get the x eliminated, or the x rather by itself, everything else eliminated. So the first set of exercises I'm going to look at from section 2.2 homework, or doesn't actually want you to solve it. It just says to think about what number would you have to multiply both sides of the equation by to get the x on the left side by itself. So if we look at number 7, we have 2/3 x is equal to 8. Well, if we want to get the x to have a coefficient of 1, we've got to eliminate this 2/3. And do you remember this rule that if you multiply numbers that are reciprocals of each other, then you get a 1, right? So what is the reciprocal of 2/3? Well, it is 3/2. So if we multiply both sides by 3/2, notice what happens. 3/2 times 2/3 is 6/6, or just 1, which is x. Okay, we can go ahead and finish it out. It said not to solve it, but we'll go ahead and talk about that. This is 24/2, or do you remember you could also do 2 into 8 is 4. 3 times 4 is 12. So we actually solved the equation. We found 12 is the answer because we multiplied both sides of that equation by the 3/2, or the reciprocal of the 2/3. Now what about number 9? Is x over 10 is equal to 3. There's a couple ways to think about this. X over 10 is equivalent to 1/10 times x is equal to 3. So we can think about what is the reciprocal of 1 over 10. Well, that is 10 over 1, or just simply 10. So if you multiply both sides by 10, 10 over 1 times 1 over 10 is just simply 10 over 10, or x, 1x, right? 3 times 10 is 30. So the answer, though, to the question, what do I have to multiply both sides by, that is 10. Here's another way to kind of interpret that. Remember in the last section I was talking about if I have x divided by 10 is equal to 3. If x is divided by 10, what will undo division? The thing that will undo division is multiplication. So if I've divided by 10, I have to multiply by 10 to undo that operation attached to the x. Okay, and in the same way, I will get the x by itself is equal to 30. Another real important one, number 14. Doesn't really matter what this number is over there, but if you have negative x is equal to 0.29, remember that negative x, what is that coefficient? That's understood to be a negative 1. X is equal to 0.29. So what number would I have to multiply the negative 1 by to make it positive 1? Well, that is negative 1, right? So I apply both sides by negative 1. We know that negative 1 times negative 1 is just positive 1, or x. Negative 1 times 9 is 0.29. Okay? Because this is saying the opposite of x is 0.29. So what is x? Well, x has to be the opposite of 0.29, which is negative 0.29. The next few problems say, by what number is it necessary to both sides of the equation to get x on the left is equal to 5. Again, think here about doing the operation attached to the variable. In this case, the variable x is multiplied by 6. So to eliminate that, we have to divide both sides by 6, right? Because 6x over 6 is just simply x would be equal to 5 over 6. I see a lot of students confusing this and wanting to subtract 6, but remember that 6x minus 6 can't be simplified, right? There's nothing that I can do to combine those, so it would not help me to get the x by itself. I've got to undo the multiplication. The only thing that will undo that is division. Okay? Now, like number 17, if you have a negative 4x is equal to 13, well, what will undo the multiplication of negative 4? It is to divide by negative 4. Okay, notice here when I divide, I'm dividing by the same sign. Unlike in the addition property, we had to change the sign because we were adding or subtracting, so we had to do the opposite. Here we're dividing by that coefficient to make it 1. So negative 4 divided by negative 4 is simply x. 13 divided by negative 4, no real pretty way to write that. We can just write this negative 13 over 4. Now you'll see these problems from one similar that we just did, number 21. Negative x is equal to 23. Well, here again, they understood to be a negative 1x. So another way that you can think of removing negative 1 is by dividing both sides by negative 1. So in actuality, if you have a negative coefficient or an opposite of x, then you can either multiply or divide both sides by negative 1. In that case, we would just get x is equal to positive divided by negative is negative, so that would be negative 23. Now here are some equations to actually go through and solve. I've kind of been doing that, but we'll just talk about some of these together. Like number 24, 7x is equal to 56. So I'm going to have to get rid of the 7, right? It's connected by multiplication. So to remove it, what I do to one side I have to do to both, and I have to divide both sides by 7. So x is equal to 8. I can certainly check. We plug in 7 times 8. Is that equal to 56? Well, yes, it is. So that means that the value 8 is the right solution. So the solution set for this equation is the set containing 8. Now your numbers don't always come out to be nice, pretty numbers. In 25, 2m is equal to 15. To isolate the m, we're going to undo the multiplication of 2, which is to divide 2. So there we get m is equal to 15 over 2. And you can just leave that. That's certainly equivalent to 7.5, but you don't need to rewrite that. That's perfectly fine. Okay. What about number 30? Negative 4x is equal to 36. So here, negative coefficient. To remove it, we divide both sides by negative 4. X divided by 4 is simply x. 36 divided by negative 4, positive divided by negative is a negative 9. Okay? And I haven't put these in solutions, but you could certainly do that. Okay? What about number 34? Negative 8x is equal to negative 64. We divide both sides by negative. Notice here that we would get x is equal to negative divided by negative is a positive. So really the tricky thing here is remember your signs. Okay? Look at number 36. 5x equals 0. Solve this one. I have to remove the 5. So what will remove the 5? Because it's connected by multiple is to divide. So 5x divided by 5 is just simply x, and 0 divided by 5 is 0. So our solution is 0. Okay? Now some of these problems here that have fractions, like for instance number 43, think of that. I can think of that as lead being divided by 6. So what will eliminate division by 6 is multiplying by 6. Oops, forgot my equal sign there. 6 times 7, z over 6 is just z. 6 times 12 is 72. What about number 52? You have a negative 5, 6d is equal to 4/9. Okay, what number was that? 52. Okay, negative 5, 6d is not there, but that's under. There's no sign writing those. So you have options here. You can either think of that as dividing both sides by negative 5, 6. It's a little bit harder to think of. The other thing you can think about is, talked about this earlier, is if I multiply the number by its reciprocal, I get a value of 1. So the reciprocal of negative 5, 6 is negative 6 over 5. So if I multiply both sides by negative 6 over 5, then I can solve that equation. Okay. It's negative 6 times negative 6. The negative times the negative is positive. 30 over 30 is 1. We said we really have 1d or d is equal to, there's no common factors there, so negative 6 times 4 is negative 24 over 5 times 9, which is 45. So that is our answer. Have a fraction, that's a coefficient. The easiest thing is just to multiply both sides by. Now the grouping of problems really have multi-steps. That is, you've got to simplify first. So like number 57 is 4x plus 3x is equal to 21. Well, we know we can combine 4x plus 3x. That gives us 7x is equal to 21. Then your goal here is eventually going to be to recognize, do I need to use the addition property or the multiplication property? Since the x is connected to the 7 by multiplication, I have to use the multiplication property, which says if I divide both sides by 7, I get the x by itself. So x is equal to 3. Okay. Number 60, 9p minus 13p is equal to 24. Well, this is just combining like terms, right? 9p minus 13p. Those are opposite, so subtract and take the sign of the larger, which is negative 4p is equal to 24. So here I have a negative 4 multiplied by p. So to eliminate that negative 4, I can divide both sides by negative 4. So in this case, my solution is p is equal to negative 6. Really, tricky things are just looking at the signs. When you divide and multiply and add and subtract sign numbers, just be really careful about that. Okay. Now here, this is translating. So number 69 says when a number is multiplied by 4, the result is 6. Find the number. So when a number is multiplied by 4, the result is 6. So here is our equal sign, right? The result is when a number is multiplied by 4, that's 4x, the result is equals 6. So what's the number? Well, the multiplication property comes in. We divide by 4. So our number is 6 over 4, or we can reduce that to the fraction 3 over 2. Okay. So the number is 3 halves, or 1 1/2. Okay. What about number 71? When a number is divided by negative 5, the result is 2. So when a number is divided by negative 5, the result is 2. So what will get rid of division by negative 5? Yeah, that is multiplication by negative 5. So if I multiply both sides by negative 5, we will get just simply x is equal to negative 10. So the number is negative 10. Okay. And that concludes the lesson on section 2.2. So at this point, you should know that the same number from both sides of an equation, or you can multiply or divide the same non-zero number and get resulting equations. The next section is going to combine both of these properties, where you might have to do addition and multiplication in one step. Okay? Contact me if you have any questions. Thank you.